Hi, hello, good afternoon everyone. I'm Dr. Harika Kishore. On behalf of Vista's Learning, I'm here as your biology educator. VLearning, it's an online education platform which works with an ideology of providing quality education for all. Visit our website www.v-learning.in where you're going to get an access for all the live classes, recorded sessions, and also concept videos, study materials, and moreover, you're going to get this lecture notes in the form of PDFs. And get your acquaintance with all the channels available and make sure to subscribe to the channel Vista's Learning Class 11 and 12. If you find this session interesting and useful, make sure to click on the like as well as share this session with your friends. And also click on the bell icon such that you are going to get all the upcoming video notifications. Saying that, let's start today's session. So, we are in the discussion about the chapter that is called as ecosystem, which comes under the unit ecology. In previous session, we have been discussing about the functions of the ecosystem. We also discussed about what are the structural components of the ecosystem, which is divided into biotic and abiotic. This is very well known for us. Here, this structural components of the ecosystem functions as a unit to perform some of the important functions of the ecosystem, which includes like productivity, decomposition, energy flow, and nutrient cycling. In that, we have finished productivity and also decomposition, where we discussed about the decomposition, which breaks down the complex organic matter into simpler inorganic matter by decomposers, right? And also we discussed about energy flow. While discussing about the energy flow, where the energy is transferring from one trophic level to another trophic level, and there is a connection by means of food chains, right? Based upon the producers, there are so many food chains we can quote, like grazing food chains, detritus food chains, and parasitic food chains, like based upon the source, based upon the producers. So here, let's continue our discussion towards detritus food chain in this session, right? In the previous session, we discussed about the grazing food chain. Here, in the name itself, detritus, while we are discussing about the decomposition, we know that detritus is a raw material, right? It's a raw material for decomposition. And the detritus food chain begins with the dead organic matter, and that dead organic matter is nothing but your detritus. Here it is made up of decomposers which are heterotrophs. We can also call this as saprotrophs, because sapro means decompose, and this heterotrophs, otherwise called as saprotrophs, which decomposes. What it decomposes? It decomposes dead organic matter, and this complex dead organic matter is breakdown, decomposed, degraded into simple inorganic substances, simple inorganic materials, like, and that is done by the decomposers like fungi, bacteria. Look at here, it is made up of decomposers, what we call it as a heterotrophs, heterotrophic organisms, mainly which includes like soil microbes, nothing but fungi and bacteria. They meet their energy, they'll get, these decomposers get their energy by acting upon the dead organic matter, nutrient requirement by degrading, decomposing dead organic matter, which is otherwise called as detritus, and that detritus is a raw material for the decomposition, which works where the decomposers work on the detritus to break down and they'll get their nutrient requirement. Now, so here, just now we said that the heterotrophs, nothing but decomposers. These are also called as saprotrophs. saprotrophs, where sapro is nothing but decompose. That means decomposers are heterotrophs. Here, as we already said that, here in the process of decomposition, what is happening? Complex organic matter is decomposed into simple inorganic material. This will happen in the presence of decomposers, right? And this process is called as decomposition. As this food chain is taking the detritus as its raw material, we are calling it as a detritus food chain. DFC. Detritus food chain. So here the decomposers, nothing but soil microbes, that is fungi and bacteria. Decomposers secretes digestive enzymes, because these digestive enzymes will feed upon the complex organic matter that break down dead and waste materials, nothing but detritus, into simple inorganic material. That is what complex dead organic matter is break down, is decomposed, is degraded in the presence of decomposers to produce, to convert into simpler inorganic material, and simple inorganic material which are subsequently absorbed by them. That means they are getting their nutrient requirement by the process called decomposition. Now, so here, as we are talking about the detritus food chain, the producer, that means the energy giver, here that is detritus. In an aquatic ecosystem, while we are discussing about the different types of the ecosystem, like natural ecosystem and artificial ecosystem. Artificial ecosystem is nothing but man-made ecosystem. Examples are gardens, like aquarium, which is made by the man. Whereas a natural ecosystem, in which we know it is divided into like both aquatic ecosystem and terrestrial ecosystem. While we are discussing about the type of the ecosystem, natural ecosystems and artificial ecosystem, under natural ecosystem, we discussed about this aquatic ecosystem as well as terrestrial ecosystem. And examples, like if it comes to the aquatic ecosystem, like river, pond ecosystem, and even sea, oceans, all water bodies, all this will comes under aquatic ecosystem. Moving on to the terrestrial ecosystem, forest ecosystem, deserts ecosystem, grassland ecosystem. These are all the examples of terrestrial ecosystem. If you look at the major conduit, already we know conduit is a channel, pipeline, for which it is useful for the transfer of the energy. Energy flow takes place. Conduit of energy flow, right? If you think about the major channel, major conduit of energy flow, by which it is happening in the case of aquatic ecosystem and by which it is happening in the case of terrestrial ecosystem, grazing food chain, and here that is detritus food chain. So the major energy flow, the major conduit for the energy flow happening by the grazing food chain when it is considered aquatic, when we consider the aquatic ecosystem. Look at here. In an aquatic ecosystem, the grazing food chain, GFC, grazing food chain, is a major conduit of major channel for the transfer of the energy. That is major conduit of or for energy flow. So here, this is very, very important to remember that the grazing food chain is a major energy flow, major channel for the energy flow in the case of aquatic ecosystem. As against to that, in the terrestrial ecosystem, a much larger fraction of energy flows through detritus food chain, through detritus food chain than through the grazing food chain. It happens by the DFC rather than by GFC. The point here is the major conduit, that means a major channel, major pipelines for the transfer of the energy in the case of aquatic ecosystem, that is by grazing food chain. When coming to the detritus ecosystem, when compared to the aquatic ecosystem, it is not through the grazing food chain, but it is by the detritus food chain. This is very, very important. Now, moving on to. So here, detritus food chain, in short, what we call it as a DFC, detritus food chain, may be connected to grazing food chain. It connects to the grazing food chain because the organisms are interdependent, interconnected. At some levels, some of the organisms of detritus food chain are prey to the grazing food chain animals, and that happens in a natural ecosystem. Some animals like what we call it as a cockroaches, crows, or omnivores. That means these organisms can take both plants as well as animals as their food. That means they can feed on both the plant systems as well as the animal system. That is what we are calling as an omnivores. Because of this omnivorous nature, some of the organisms which present in the grazing food chain can be connected with that of the organisms which are present in the detritus food chain. That means they are acting as a prey. So this connection, this interconnection, this natural interconnection of the food chains are going to further as a food web, to construct the food web. That is what we are saying. These natural interconnections of the food chain make it a food web. Because if you take like where we can see common animals can be act both as a herbivores and sometimes as a carnivores. That means here there is a possibility where the organisms which are present in one food chain can be a prey for the animals that are present on the another food chain. That means there is an interconnection between one food chain and another food chain which leads to the formation of these food chains into food webs. Now, here organisms first trophic level, second trophic level, third trophic level, and top trophic level. Like for example, this is occupied by producers, and the second level is occupied by consumers. So this is primary consumer, this is secondary consumer, and this is tertiary consumers. Like for example, plants, herbivores, primary carnivores, secondary carnivores. Yes. So look at here. Organisms whether they are depending upon the level of its trophic level, they will occupy different levels. Like we can say producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary consumers. Look at here. Organisms occupy a place in a natural surroundings, a community, according to their feeding relationships with each other. Whether they are like carnivores, herbivores, whether they are producing their food energy, that means their own food energy is produced by the producers. So here, based on the source of the nutrition or based upon the source of the food, organisms occupies a specific place in the food chain that is known as its trophic level. And this occupying of each and every organisms, that is happened based upon the source of nutrition from which they are getting nutrition or food. See, as the producers has the ability to synthesize its own food material, they are providing the energy, they are providing the food. Therefore, it occupies the first trophic level. And all the producers, the herbivores eats the plants. That means they are depending upon the producers. Herbivores are depending upon the producers. Therefore, it occupies a second trophic level, and that is called as second trophic level, is otherwise called as primary consumers, because they consumes the energy from the producers. Moving on feeding on this herbivores, primary carnivores are getting their livelihood, and depending upon the secondary carnivores depends on the primary carnivores. These secondary carnivores occupies the top carnivore, that means the top level of the trophic level of an ecosystem. That is what the occupying of each and every organisms into different trophic levels happens in the ecosystem based upon the source of the nutrition where it is getting. That means based upon the source of the food where it is getting from. Obviously, each and every trophic level get its energy from its lower level. For example, if you take herbivores is getting its food by depending on the lower level of trophic, that is plants. If you take the examples of primary carnivores are getting its food based on it is depending upon its lower trophic level. Which is the lower trophic level for the primary carnivores? That is herbivores, right? Now, so the same thing here, this is the image that has been given in your NCERT textbook. You can refer to that. Meanwhile, I'll explain what it is happening. So the same thing, as we already said, that the bottom, or we can say the first trophic level, is occupied by the producers, right? The same thing, producers, herbivores, primary carnivores, secondary carnivores. Here, producer, and this producer is providing energy, is providing the food for the primary consumer, and the secondary consumer is getting its food depending on the primary consumer, and tertiary consumer is getting its food depending on the secondary consumer. So the tertiary consumer depends on the secondary consumer for its food. Secondary consumer depends on the primary consumer for its food. The primary consumer gets its food depends on, as it is depending on the producers. Now, the same thing here, as the producers are the main source of the energy, as the producers has the capacity to synthesize its own food materials by performing the photosynthesis using radiant energy that we already discussed, where we have mentioned about PAR, photosynthetically active radiation, that is only 50%. Of that, only 2 to 10% of the total PAR has been fixed by the producers, and which is acting as a source to provide the energy for the entire trophic levels, right? So here, the producers occupies first trophic levels, that is the plants, examples like plants, grass, trees, phytoplanktons, and secondary consumers are the second, that occupies the second trophic level, and that is the herbivores, which feeds on the plants. And that herbivores examples are zooplanktons, grasshoppers, and that means cattle which feeds on the grass, that is cow. And secondary consumer occupies third trophic level, which is a primary carnivores, and the example for that are birds, fishes, and wolf. The top carnivore, that is tertiary consumer. What we call it as a top carnivore or secondary carnivores, and that occupies fourth trophic level, that is a top trophic level. And for the examples are lion, man. So this is how the arrangement of the different trophic levels happens in your ecosystem. Now, the same thing, producers belongs to the first trophic level, herbivores, primary consumers, to the second, and carnivores, secondary consumers, to the third trophic level. Trophic level. Right. So here, the important point to note is that amount of the energy decreases at successive trophic levels. We know that this transfer of the energy follows 10% law, where out of total energy what is having consisted by the producers, only 10% of this energy is going to transfer to the next level. And whatever the 10% is, it's 100% of the primary consumer. Out of that, only 10% transfers to the next level. And out of the total energy what is contained by the secondary consumer, it will transfer only 10% to the top trophic level, that is tertiary consumers. So that means, for example, if it is having 10,000 kilojoules, then it will transfer 1000 kilojoules. And from here, it transfers 100 kilojoules. From here, 10 kilojoules. Only 10%. This is nothing but your 10% law. Out of total energy, amount of the energy decreases, keeps on decreases while it is transferring from one trophic level to the another trophic level. While it is successively reaching to the top carnivore, very less amount of the energy has been transferred. Now, so here, when an organism dies, when an organism reaches its senescence, aging phase, then it will go into death phase. It is converted into detritus. Detritus is nothing but dead organic matter, nothing but your dead biomass. That serves as an energy source for decomposers. Just now we said that the decomposers are nothing but saprotrophs, where it breaks down a complex organic matter, dead organic matter, dead biomass into its simple inorganic matter and gets the energy source out of it. So here, organisms at each trophic level depends on those at the lower level for their energy demands. The same thing here, producers which occupy bottom trophic level, and the herbivores which is occupying the second trophic level. The herbivores depends upon its lower, that means producers. Same thing here, carnivores and top carnivores. The same thing, top carnivores depends upon the carnivores and carnivores depends upon the herbivores, herbivores depends upon the consumers. Every time organisms at each trophic level depends upon those at the lower trophic level for their energy demands. Now, so look at here. Each trophic level has a certain mass of living material at very particular time. At every given particular time, it consisting of a certain mass of living material, and that is what we are call it as a biomass, and that is the standing crop. The standing crop is measured as a mass of the living organism that just we mentioned, that is nothing but biomass. Biomass are the number in a particular unit. This is nothing but your standing crop. Now, the biomass of the species can be expressed both in a dry as well as fresh weight, but the accurate measurement is dry weight. Look at here. The biomass of the species is expressed in the term of both fresh as well as dry weight. But the measurement of biomass in terms of dry weight is more accurate. So remember, this is very important to remember. We can express both its fresh as well as dry weight, but the expression of the biomass in terms of the dry weight is more accurate, because water is not going to take into account. That is what the fresh weight is not considered as an accurate measure, but the dry weight is considered as an accurate measurement of biomass. Now, the same thing we already discussed, 10% La. 10% La. So here, producers, right? Primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, right? As each level of trophic level, while it is transferring its energy to the next trophic level, there is a loss of energy in the form of heat. Therefore, it is possible only to transfer 10% out of the total energy what a particular trophic level of the ecosystem is having. Therefore, if the producers is having 10,000 kilojoules of energy, it is going to transfer only 10% of it. That means 1,000. And same way 100. And same way 10. So look at here. The number of trophic levels, these are the number of trophic levels we already know. In a grazing food chain is restricted as the transfer of energy flow follows. The transfer of energy follows 10% law. What do you mean by 10% law? Only 10% of the energy is transferred to the each trophic level from the lower trophic level. This is the lower trophic level. While we are moving towards the higher trophic level, at each and every trophic level, it is going to transfer only 10% out of the total energy what it is having. So here in nature, it is possible to have so many levels like producers, primary conveyors, secondary conveyors in the grazing food chain, out of which it is going to get only 10% of the initial energy. Now, this is the picture where it is given in your NCERT textbook to give the idea about how the transfer of the energy takes place from one trophic level to another trophic level. So here is a sun, ultimate source of energy. Source of energy. Total radiant energy is not usable, only a small particular range, and that is called as photosynthetically active radiant energy. So photosynthetically active radiance, the 50% only comes under the photosynthetically active radiance. Out of that, only 2 to 10% is being fixed by the producers, that are plants. So sun, by that means out of 50, only 2 to 10% only. The remaining is lost in the form of heat, right? And the first trophic level, that is the producers, that are plants, right? And these plants, while it is eaten up by the herbivores like insects, like grasshoppers, which feeds on the grass. Here, this is the first trophic level. And coming to, this is the second trophic level, otherwise called as primary consumers, because it consumes on feeding on producers. So that primary consumers are your herbivores. Here, while transferring the energy from the producers to the herbivores also, there is a loss of energy in the form of heat. Now, moving on to second to third trophic level, that is secondary consumers. These are primary consumers, these are secondary consumers, and these are tertiary consumers. And these secondary consumers are nothing but carnivores, primary carnivores. So here, While the transfer is taking place from herbivores to primary carnivores, also there is a loss of energy in the form of heat. The same thing happens during the transfer of energy from third trophic level to the fourth trophic level, which is occupied by tertiary consumers or secondary carnivores or top carnivores. This is grazing food chain. Moving on to detritus food chain 2, here when these organisms are reaching its depth phase, then it is being decomposed by acting upon decomposers. So these decomposers will act upon this dead organic matter. While that is happening also everywhere, if the plant is reaching its death phase, that also will leave some of the energy in the form of heat, and only 10% of the energy is going to reach to the decomposers, which decomposes this and gets its food, energy, nutrient requirement. The same thing happens with the herbivores, same thing happens with carnivores and also top carnivores. Look at here. So the simple thing is, each and every level, that means from one trophic level to the another trophic level, if the energy is flowing, most of the energy is going to loss in the form of the heat, and only 10% of the primary energy is going to reach to the next trophic level of the ecosystem. That's it. Now, we must have familiar with the shape of the pyramids. Let's understand about the ecological pyramids. This is how the pyramid will look like, and this is how the trophic levels will occupy. So here as this ecological pyramids was first represented by the Elton, and this ecological pyramids are also called as Eltonian pyramids. Moving on to the base of the pyramids. This is the base of the pyramids is very broad. Yes, it is broad when compared to the apex. This is base and this is apex. The base of the pyramid is always broad, right? See, it is broad when compared to the apex of the pyramid, and it narrows towards the apex, right? One gets a similar shape whether you express the food or energy relationship between the organisms at different trophic level. Whether you represents the food or the energy, we are going to get this same shape, that is pyramid shape. That is what we are calling it as an ecological pyramids. Now, this relationship is expressed in terms of pyramids of number, pyramids of biomass, pyramids of energy. 1, 2, 3. The base of each pyramid always represents the producers, or what we call it as a first trophic level, while the apex represents the tertiary, that is a top carnivores, tertiary or top level consumers, right? Now, so here the same thing what we have discussed. The three types of the ecological pyramids that are usually studied are pyramids of number, pyramids of biomass, pyramids of energy. Let's look at it. Here, any calculation of whether it is an energy content or biomass or number has to be involve all the organisms at each trophic level. It has to involve all the organisms which are present in each trophic level. Here is a thing where each and organisms will occupy two different trophic levels. For example, if you take insects, see for example, this is plant, insects, birds, if you take an example of sparrow, where it will directly feed on the producer, that time it comes under herbivores. Or sometimes where the plant is eaten up by the insects, and these insects are acting as a food for the birds, that means sparrow. In this level, it is producer, herbivore, and it is carnivore. Same sparrow is occupying both the levels as a herbivore and carnivores. That is a thing, no generalization is possible. That means generalization is not possible. No generalization we make will be true if we take only a few organisms at any level of a trophic level that is taken into account. We have to involve every organism that comes under a particular trophic level. But the problem that comes here is the same organism can occupy sometimes at the level of the herbivores and sometimes at the level of the carnivores. Also, a given organism may, the same point just now we mentioned, also a given organism may occupy more than one trophic level simultaneously. One must remember that the trophic levels represents a functional level, not a species as such, right? So here, a given species may occupy more than one trophic level in the same ecosystem at the same time. That is what happened with the example of sparrow. For example, sparrow is a primary consumer when it eats seeds, fruits, peas. That means directly it is feeding on the plants, producers. And a second consumer, that is secondary consumer, when it eats the insects and worms. Right? So here, producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer. So, producer is plant, and this plant is providing the food for insects, and these insects are taken as a food by sparrow. So, in this way, the sparrow is a primary consumer because it is a herbivore, directly taking a food from the producer. But in this way, it is acting as a secondary consumer because it is feeding on the primary consumer, which is getting its food on the producer. Right? So that is the example that is given, where it is being an amnivore, it can get directly a source, that means the food, from its plant source, or it can get animal source, that is insects here. So, a given species may occupy more than one trophic level. Here the sparrow is occupying herbivore's trophic level as well as secondary consumer trophic level. Now, in most ecosystems, all the pyramids of number, of energy and biomass are upright. That means it will form a shape of this. It is not inverted in most of the cases. It is not inverted, it is upright. But inverted pyramids are also exist. In the case of number, in the case of the number, that is the pyramids of number when you consider the parasitic food chain. So look at here. Producers are more in number as well as biomass as well as energy when compared to the herbivores, and herbivores are more in number as well as biomass when compared to the carnivores. That is what the pyramids always takes a shape of upright. So also when not only compared to the number, biomass, but also energy. Also energy at a lower trophic level is always more when compared to the higher trophic levels. That means this is first. trophic level. And this is second, this is third, and this is top. Always energy, number, biomass will be more in lower trophic level when compared to the above trophic level. That means the energy, number, biomass of the producers are always more when compared to the energy, number and biomass of the herbivores. Same way, the herbivores' energy is more, herbivores' biomass is more, number is more when compared to the next trophical level. That means nothing but here primary carnivores, right? Now, moving on to pyramids of energy is always upright, can never be inverted, because the energy that is present in the producers are always more when compared to the energy that is produced by the herbivores. Because when the energy flows from a particular trophic level to a next trophic level, some energy is always lost in the form of the heat. That is what, while we are explaining about 10% law, out of total energy which is having by the first trophic level, only 10% is reaching to the next level. Then that means obviously more energy will be present in the first trophic level when compared to the energy that is present in the second trophic level. Now, each bar in the energy pyramid will indicate the amount of the energy present at each trophic level in a given time or annually per unit area. Now, however, there are some limitations. Here this is point. Just now we said that always it is upright, but there are exception cases where we can see inverted pyramids also when consider the number. That means the pyramids of number in the case of parasitic food chain will give an inverted pyramid. And also biomass, where in the case of seas, where we can find inverted because zooplanktons biomass will be more when compared to the phytoplanktons. We'll discuss it. Here, however, there are certain limitations that are present in the ecological pyramids, such as, this is an important point, it doesn't take into an account the same species belonging to more than one trophic level. Just now we explained where there are certain organisms which occupies more than one trophic level, and that point is not taken into the account while constructing this ecological pyramids, because this is they don't take the consideration of occupation of one organism more than two trophic level. There is a limitation that exists in the ecological pyramids. Along with that, it assumes a simple food chain that never exists. This simple food chain never exists because each and every food chain, no matter whether it is a detritus food chain or grazing food chain or parasitic food chain, each and every organisms that are present in a particular food chain are going to interdepend. That means it is going to show interconnection with an organism that are present in the other food chain, right? There is no simple flow of the food chain that exists in the nature. Sometimes that almost never exists in nature. It doesn't accommodate food web. It doesn't accommodate food chains, as they are interconnected. They're going to make into food webs. Food chains will make food webs because of its interdependency, interconnection with one species to another species. That means one organism to another organisms that are present in another food chain. And that is not accommodated in this ecological pyramids. And never saprophytes has been included. We know that how the saprophytes are very, very important for cleaning the ecosystem, but still, besides of its great contribution, moreover, the saprophytes are not given any place in ecological pyramids, even though it plays a very vital means important role in the ecosystem. So here is the images of pyramids of energy, pyramids of number, pyramids of biomass. That was given in your NCERT textbook. So you can refer to the NCERT textbook to have the view of all the images. Here, let's understand. The first one is pyramid of number. Always pyramid of number is upright. Pyramid of numbers are always upright. In a grassland, here is a grassland ecosystem. That means grass, grasshoppers, and that grasshoppers, birds, man. Only 3 top carnivores are supported in an ecosystem based on the production of nearly 6 billion plants. So this is a producer, plants. And here is a herbivores. Here is a primary carnivores. Here is a secondary carnivores. And plants, primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers. Primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers. And this numericals is given to you to get an idea of how the number changes. Always the number is huge at the first trophic level and it keeps on decreasing while we are moving towards the top trophic level of an ecosystem. And moving to the pyramids of biomass. This is also upright. And here we can see this is the producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers. So here, pyramid of biomass shows a sharp decrease in biomass at higher trophic levels. This is the bottom, that is the first trophic level. Second, third, and top. While we are moving towards, there is a decrease in the biomass. But exception, where inverted biomass pyramid is observed when we take small standing crops of phytoplanktons supports a very standing crop of zooplanktons. So this is a level which is occupied by phytoplanktons and this is the level which is occupied by zooplanktons. As small standing crop of the phytoplanktons is providing energy for the large biomass having zooplanktons will get an inverted pyramid. And this is an exceptional case. The same thing happens with the case of pyramids of number in parasitic food chain. There also will get inverted pyramid. Now, moving on to an ideal pyramid of energy. Pyramid of energy, obviously energy is more in the first trophic level. This is producers, second, third, and top. The top trophic level will have a very less energy when compared to the energy which is present in the first trophic level. So this is an ideal pyramid of energy. Observe that primary producers converts only 1% of the energy in the sunlight available to it, and that is net primary productivity. So this is how we'll get all the upright pyramids when considered to the number, energy, and biomass. And there are some exceptions which we have discussed already. Yeah, this is it. So in this class, we discussed about the energy flow as well as energy pyramids in the case of biomass, number, and as well as energy, right? So this is it for today's class. Let's discuss about another chapter in the coming up session. Until then, keep learning with We Learning. Thank you.